All right, guys, you're ready for an incredibly important lesson for beginners and also for improving players. And it is not to launch pointless attacks. And that includes also pointless checks. I've got more than 40 examples to share with you in this one video. So let's just dive in. The idea of this is that you see lots and lots of examples and learn to spot the patterns and understand, so that it really seeps into your consciousness when you're playing chess. Simply, there are lots of opportunities to launch an attack, but here's the key thing, and this is what marks out the difference between poor players and good players. This is one of the main things. I mean, what is chess about? Chess is about one thing. It's about making move selection, and that's all we have in chess, right? And either your moves will make your position better, or they will often make your opponent's position better. So let's just dive in. Let's look at a load of examples. So in this game, I'm 1400 rated in this one, right? My opponent, who's 1350, plays bishop to b4 check, right? And it's a check, but not all checks are good, because simply I now play c3, okay? And the bishop's now under attack. This is a counter attack. It's blocking this diagonal towards the king, right? And what's black going to do? If he captures the pawn here, I recapture again. So he's captured outwards with his advanced central pawn, and I recapture again, attacking the bishop with the pawn, and that's defended by the knight, so completely pointless. And here, that's where we go, and the bishop has to retreat. Okay, so he's lost his he's lost his e-pawn that captured here, which was out of the Scotch gambit, and I've captured towards the middle. Yes, I've got an isolated pawn, but now white's ready to castle, and there you go. Right, next one. This is the Scandinavian defense, all right? And here, so white's played e4, I've played d5, here we're both 1000 rated, and now we have bishop to b5 check. Now this is a very, very common kind of check. People throw out bishops very early, but now just c6, again, blocks off this line towards the king, and the bishop simply has to retreat, losing a tempo, and now, I just get to develop. And now basically what's happened is, with that move, white has relinquished the advantage of having the initiative in the game. Okay, next one. So here, this is in the French defense. I've just played d4, and again the same thing, throwing out a bishop, c3 blocks off the thing, and black loses a tempo, and white has this nice strong pawn center already. Gets to complete development, and it's all good. This is the Indian game that black's playing. Black now plays again, bishop out, and now the bishop blocks the check, right? Now, if black captures the bishop, then we've got knight can recapture, or queen can recapture. And what has black gained? What has black gained with using his turn to bring out this bishop? Goes to there, and here the bishop just retreats, and nothing at all is gained by that. White has been invited to develop a piece simply for free. Now with this bishop coming back here, it's blocking the queen from coming out. Nothing gained whatsoever in that. Okay, now here, this is from the Ruy Lopez game. Here I'm 1000 rated along with my opponent. Throw out a pointless attack on the queen here, not a check. Black gets to develop his bishop for free, and see now, if I was to capture, he's got knight captures, and black's ready to castle. So retreat the bishop, nothing's gained at all in that. So here white has just played his bishop out to d3. I simply retreat my bishop, and now white continues with bishop to b5, check, but again, just push the pawn and it simply wins a tempo, right? And black gets to continue with development. So in this one, again, I play my bishop out to b4 with check, but what's the point? Again, c3 is pushed and the bishop just has to retreat. This game is in the Philidor defense, both rated about 1,000. I throw out my bishop, bishop blocks, and again, if I capture the bishop, then I've used two moves. One to bring my bishop out, and the second move to capture the bishop, but then black would get the opportunity to develop either queen or knight with tempo. Completely pointless. In this example, we can see that queens can also be guilty of the same mistake. So here black plays the queen out to a5 with check, and white simply blocks with the bishop, forcing the queen to retreat. Again, simply free development for your opponent. Who's come out better of this? White has. Okay. In this example, again, just throw out the bishop with check, c3, we've seen it several times before, blocks off the path to the king, and also opens up the idea of queen coming out here, attacking the bishop again, also with check perhaps. The bishop has to retreat and nothing's been gained. This example comes from the Sicilian, both players rated around 1100 here. Again, simple check, bishop blocks, bishop has to retreat. Free development for black. In this example, I attack the knight, knight moves in, and now I try and kick the knight. But what I've missed, of course, here is that there's no real threat here. There's no reason to kick the knight. There is an actual threat, and that is that we have two knights looking at this pawn on e5. So what's the point of kicking the knight? Knight simply takes the free pawn, and black is absolutely fine in that situation. This game is in the England gambit. Here my opponent's rated in 600s. So we have e5, g2, I take the pawn. Instead of recapturing the pawn, brings out a knight, I defend, and now white plays b4, which is completely pointless because the bishop can simply capture the pawn with check. Here's one in the Sicilian. Again, black brings out the queen prematurely, simply invites g3, again blocking off the diagonal and causing the queen to have to retreat. So nothing gained. Here's an example towards the middle game. White has castled, black hasn't castled, and white now throws out the bishop with an attack on the knight. So the knight is defended twice. It's defended by bishop and king. However, f6 is very straightforward, forces the bishop to retreat. So pointless attack. Here's an example where white has played the London system. So black here castles, and now the bishop comes out to b5 with an attack on the queen, but again simply pushing the c-pawn, kicks the bishop, bishop has to retreat. In this example here, white, I don't know what white's thinking here really, because the queen's out here but doesn't have very many squares to go at. It's pretty cramped actually in this situation, but here white chooses to play g4, and that simply invites queen to h4 with check. Now either the king is going to have to move and lose castling rights, there's no other piece that can block apart from the queen, and queen takes queen, king takes queen, and white now can't castle, also with a hanging pawn here. So ill-conceived move there, that's by a 1000 player. In this instance, black captures the bishop with his knight, queen recaptures, and now black gets excited. This is black 1300 rated, because the queen and king are in line. So black throws in what looks to be a pin on the queen, but there's simply f4. So white gets to advance a pawn, kicks the bishop with tempo, and bishop has to retreat. So here's an example from the Vienna gambit. So you can see that black has captured outwards with his f-pawn, And now the knight comes in attacking the queen, but the knight's also attacking c7. Right, very, very typical move in the Vienna. Black now plays a queen out to h4. King moves away. And now the bishop comes out to kick the knight, but misses the obvious fork on the king and the rook falls. In this example now, white plays the knight into g5. Now, you have to remember rule number 1 and rule number 2 in Chess Club, which is my king safe? And here there is an obvious checkmate threat of queen takes h7 mate. Here, for some reason, my opponent rated 1000 decides to try and kick the queen, but queen simply drops into h7 with mate. So another pointless attack. In this game, material is roughly equal. Black has one extra pawn, black castles, and now the bishop comes into e7, which is an attack on the rook. The bishop is not under threat there, but it simply walks into rook to e3, and now the bishop is pinned on the king. How can the bishop save itself? Here actually white resigns at this point, because he's simply about to lose a piece, so totally pointless. In this example, I've just pushed a pawn. My opponent's rated mid 1500s, right? And white here has an option simply to retreat the knight to h3, which isn't an ideal square, but it's a decent knight. White now just decides to play the knight into e6 with an attack on the queen and the bishop. The knight is defended by a pawn, but is attacked twice. So simply bishop takes knight, pawn takes and rook takes, and white's just dropped a pawn for really no benefit whatsoever. Also notice that black here has a number of pawns on light squares here, and all of these guys are all completely blocked off, right? So in this kind of scenario, a knight is a far better piece than a bishop, and so I take the opportunity to get rid of my light squared bishop, which really can go absolutely nowhere in this game. Right, so I swap it off and win a pawn at the same time, and black is in a much better position. Here my opponent's rated in the 1300s and decides to throw in a check with the knight, but failed to spot that the square he's moving to was guarded by the queen, simply dumps a piece. Here's an older game where both of us are in the 1000 range. White's just played bishop to e5 with check. Now the king, I guess, could move to this square to defend the knight, which would probably be okay. But in this instance, I move my king to b6. And instead of simply capturing the free knight, white decides to throw in an in-between move with check. But that just allows the king to come back and defend the knight. In this example, white is castled. My opponent now throws in a check. Right, this is also a discovered attack on the queen between both queens. But here, it's very simple. The queen can simply grab the knight, right? Another alternative would have been queen takes queen, king would have to recapture, and then grab the knight with the rook. So, much better in these instances simply to retreat the piece, even though it would probably lead to losing castling rights anyway. Here we are in an opening. I'm rated 1100, opponent's rated in the 1200s. I now throw out my queen with check and fall into b5 and just have to retreat the queen. But black then throws out his queen to h4 with check, and again I just drop my bishop back to f2, hitting the queen again, and now black has to retreat the queen. So in that instance, we've both been guilty of the same pointless type of check in just a couple of moves. Here's another great example of a poor in-between move. So we're both rated in the 1000s. White decides to move his rook to h4. Now, this is actually now completely hanging. For some reason, I decide here to play an in-between check. So this is a fork. It looks as though the king's got to move and then I'm going to win the rook anyway, but completely and utterly pointless. So yes, white does have to lose a rook here, but here white gets to play the desperado move. The rook on g1 can now simply capture the bishop, I recapture, and the rook moves out of trouble, right? This pawn now can't defend because it's pinned by the bishop. So simply bishop takes rook would have been absolutely fine there, and this in-between move just gave up. It allowed white to get the bishop in return for his rook, and very likely a pawn as well. In this game, my opponent's rated 1100s, I'm in the 1200s. I've just pushed a pawn to kick the knight, and the knight comes in with check. But I simply grab the knight, pawn takes, and rook takes. So white has, all white needed to do there was to think a couple of moves ahead and say, what's going to happen if I play this move? Also look, yeah, I've got a few dark squared pawns there. This bishop really has very little scope in the game, but white's knight, I would argue, is not a bad piece. So to give up the knight and to give up the pawn gains white absolutely nothing in this scenario. In this example, we are in an interesting ending. White has a rook and two bishops against black's two rooks. Now here I play my king to c3, and black throws in a completely pointless check. Right, black couldn't have captured the bishop because it was defended by the pawn as well as the king. So pointless check. The king now retreats from check, but black has actually set up a tactic now against himself. Drops the rook down to g1 attacking the bishop, but can you see the tactic? He's put his rook on a diagonal with his king, and the rook is now simply going to fall, and here black simply resigns. So in this game, I'm rated in the 1400s, my opponent's at 1000. I move my queen to c7 to attack the knight. White now launches a counter-attack against the rook. The rook simply sidesteps the attack, but white now has put two pieces, in fact 3 pieces, all of which are undefended and all of them in line. So white now throws in the knight with check, but I simply capture the knight, bishop takes, and now I have a choice of bishops. So basically I've just traded a rook, which is worth a nominal 5 points, for 2 minor pieces which are worth a nominal 6 points, plus the bishop's still under attack. But more important than that, you look at the pieces that we each have, I have 1 extra piece on the board. So I have a knight and a bishop now, compared to white's extra rook. But these rooks are still in the box, they're still in the corners, they haven't taken any part in the game, and my bishops can very easily come out and start causing some trouble themselves. So in general, trading 2 minor pieces for a rook and a pawn doesn't really make much sense. Or in this case, simply 2 minor pieces for a rook makes even less sense. So in this example, white has a queen embedded into black's territory. It's defended twice. Also notice that this knight is pinned by black's queen against the king. That knight cannot move. But these knights are paired. They are defending each other right now. So here, black plays knight to d5, attacking the queen, right, and this bishop, and also this knight. So here, white decides to play the knight into d6. This is a slightly more complex example, right? But this knight had a job, which is to defend that guy, right? So in this instance, black can simply capture the knight, queen captures, and now the knight falls. Okay, so black has effectively simply won a piece with that move. So white here was not obliged to move the knight at that point. that there is a threat against the queen. I guess the queen's actually effectively trapped here. The queen has no squares. So here, I think an exchange of queens would have been the appropriate move, right? Rather than this, which just, as we've seen, drops a piece. However it goes, drops a piece. And now we have an exchange of queens, and black is simply better. Final example. Here, black has played b6 to attack the bishop. And now, white throws in an in-between check. And it's very easy to think that throwing in a check can't hurt, right? It's a greater threat. So white's bishop is under attack. Let's throw in a check. But now king to d6, and white is now in a position where the bishop is under attack and the knight is under attack, and the knight can't move to here to defend the bishop because it's guarded by a pawn. So knight moves and the bishop falls. And now white is up, what? No, it's equal material. But white actually resigns in this situation. So there you go. There's about 40 examples of completely pointless attacks. It's very easy, particularly for beginners in chess, to think, oh, that's an attack, that's a check, right? But you have to think just a couple of moves ahead and say, if I play this move, what is my opponent going to do? And the bottom line is this going to turn out better for my position or better for my opponent's position, right? And I hope that going through this video once, maybe go through it a few times, those patterns will start to think in. But more importantly, it's that simple thought process. Yes, it's an attack. Yes, it's a move. But is it a good one? And the way that you figure that out is, if I play this, what is my opponent going to do? And bottom line, is it better for me or is it better for them? And you can see that we've got players ranging all the way from like 600 to 1500 in these examples. We all do it. If you want to get better at chess, just quit doing it. Simple as that. Okay, guys. I mean, you know, none of these are perfect games. There are probably lots of other tactics and ideas that could be implemented here. But there you go. Just let that soak in and try and take that mentality forward into your games as you progress. You will do better. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.